Welcome to Glossika Intro Series. In this series, we talk about the basics of languages, and in today's video, we will talk about the Korean language. Korean alphabet. Korean alphabet is quite logical and very easy to learn, and many concepts we mention in this video will be easier to understand if you can read the alphabet. So we highly recommend that you learn the alphabet, and in this video, focus on the Korean text rather than the romanization. Korean alphabet consists of 24 basic letters, 14 consonants and 10 basic vowels. The consonants are divided into 3 simple groups. Plain consonants.
그, 느, 드, 르, 무, 프, 스, 은, 즈, 흐.
Aspirated consonants, meaning they are pronounced with an exhalation of breath.
크, 트, 프, 츠.
Tense consonants. These are just plain consonants but pronounced with a harder or stiffer voice.
끄, 뜨, 뿌, 스, 즈, 그, 크, 끄, 드, 트, 뜨, 부, 프, 뿌, 스, 스, 즈, 츠, 즈.
Vowels. These are the basic vowels in Korean language.
아, 야, 어, 여, 오, 요, 우, 유, 으, 이.
We also have double vowels. Double vowels are composed of basic vowels.
에, 예, 예, 와, 워, 위, 의, 왜, 왜.
Although these vowels are written differently, they sound identical. Korean is written in blocks instead of individual letters, and a block contains a minimum of 2 letters, and these are the block patterns. So looking at the blocks, it's quite easy to find the vowels and consonants in each block. If a block ends with a consonant, it's called final consonant, or 받침 in Korean, which means support or prop. A block can have 1 or 2 final consonants. We will talk about the pronunciation of final consonants very soon. Pronunciation rules. We will shortly talk about some important and basic pronunciation rules in Korean. This letter is called ing in Korean, but we just call it the circle letter for the sake of simplicity. When this letter comes at the beginning of a block, it is silent. Since Korean letters cannot be written separately and each block must contain at least 2 letters, if we write a single vowel like this, it's not correct. So we need to attach the circle to the vowel. In this place, the circle acts as a placeholder and it has no sound. But when the circle comes as a final consonant, it has a ng sound. For example,
공, 방, 상.
Another important note about the circle is that if a block ends with a final consonant and the next block starts with a circle, the pronunciation of the final consonant will move to the next block.
씻어요. 독일. 군인. 직업.
Exception to this rule: when the circle itself comes as a final consonant and the next block starts with a circle, the ng sound will not move to the next block.
영어. 강아지.
When the letter
흐,
is followed by the circle, the letter
흐.
becomes silent. And if there are double final consonants, the final consonant before the
흐.
will move to the next block.
좋아요. 아나. 싫어.
The double vowel 의 has 3 different sounds according to its position in a sentence. When it comes at the beginning of a word, it's pronounced as
의, 의사, 의자,
but when it comes at the end of a word, it's pronounced as
이, 회의,
and when it's used as a possession particle, it's pronounced as
에, 그녀의 가방,
pronunciation of the final consonant. If we look at the blocks again, we can see that a block ends with either a vowel or a consonant. If a block ends with a consonant, it's called the final consonant or 받침. And there could be one or two final consonants in a block. The final consonants are not always pronounced the same way they should, and there are some important and basic sound changes that you need to learn in order to read the Korean words correctly. We cannot talk about all the rules in one video, but we will tell you some of the most important ones that you need to know. These letters, when they come as a final consonant and are not followed by the circle letter, are pronounced as
드, 곧, 및, 옷, 잇, 맛, 꽃, 읒,
and these are pronounced as
그, 먹, 억, 깍,
these are also pronounced as
그, 밥, 입, 읍,
but if they are followed by the circle, the pronunciation of the final consonant will move to the next block and are read normally.
옷, 옷이, 맛, 맞이, 꽃, 꽃이.
There are always some exceptions to the sound shift. Two of the most common exceptions are, for example, so they are pronounced as
같이,
instead of 같이 and
굳이,
instead of 굳이. When there are two final consonants and the next letter is not the circle, only one of them is pronounced. These are the double consonant combinations. And in all but two of them, the first letter is read. An easy way to remember these two is to memorize a word for each. For example, try to memorize and remember these two words.
삼, 익,
A bit earlier we said that when there are two final consonants in a block, only one of them is pronounced, or a final consonant is not always pronounced as it should. But when the next block starts with a circle, the pronunciation of the second consonant moves to the next block, and both letters are read normally.
삶, 삶이, 박, 밝아, 넓, 넓어.
Plural. To make a noun plural, simply add
들,
after the noun. For example,
사람, 사람들, 차, 차들, 책, 책들, 새, 새들.
Korean speech levels. There are 7 speech levels in Korean, and each level has its own unique set of verb endings, which are used to indicate the level of formality of a situation. You don't have to worry about the speech levels since some speech levels are rarely used. The most common ones are formal, polite, and the informal level. In this video, we will use the polite form since it's the most common form and can easily be turned into the informal form. Pronouns. These are the subject pronouns in Korean.
저, 당신, 그, 그녀, 우리, 당신들, 그들.
Note, pronouns are often omitted in daily conversations, especially the second person pronouns. Possession. You can add
의,
after a noun or a pronoun to express possession. For example,
저의 가방, 그의 책, 그녀의 차, 우리의 집, 나라의 경제, 지구의 역사. 저의 제, 당신의, 그의, 그녀의, 우리의, 그들의.
adjective. All verbs and adjectives in Korean language end with
다,
for example,
먹다, 화나다, 기쁘다.
adjectives in Korean can act like both verbs and adjectives. If you use it with a noun or to describe a noun, we conjugate it as an adjective.
기쁜 얼굴,
But when we say,
기뻐요.
it's conjugated as a verb. So first, we will talk about conjugating adjectives to use them with nouns. To get the verb stem, we first need to remove the
다,
at the end of the verb or adjective. If the stem ended with a vowel, we add
느, 기쁘다, 기쁜, 기쁜 얼굴, 화나다, 화난, 화난 표정, 슬프다, 슬픈, 슬픈 영화.
adjectives that end with
하다,
also become
한, 행복하다, 행복한, 행복한 사람, 피곤하다, 피곤한, 피곤한 남자, 똑똑하다, 똑똑한, 똑똑한 여자.
if the last letter is a consonant, we add,
은,
for example,
짧다, 짧은, 짧은 다리, 좁다, 좁은, 좁은 방, 높다, 높은 산,
some adjectives end with.
있다, 없다,
For these adjectives, remove the
다,
and add the.
는,
For example,
재미있다, 재미있는, 재미있는 책, 재미없다, 재미없는, 재미없는 영화, 맛있다, 맛있는, 맛있는 과일.
there are also irregular adjectives. The irregular adjectives end with a
브,
letter. For example,
시끄럽다,
for these adjectives, remove the
브, 다,
and add
운, 시끄럽다, 시끄러운, 시끄러운 소리, 뜨겁다, 뜨거운, 뜨거운 커피, 귀엽다, 귀여운, 귀여운 강아지.
and. To connect two nouns with and, we can use either.
와, 과, 하고.
If the first noun ends with a vowel, we use,
와,
for example,
저와 당신. 고양이와 개. 남자와 여자.
if the first noun ends with a consonant, we use,
과,
example,
빵과 물. 낮과 밤. 삶과 죽음.
exercise. Use either wa or qua to connect the two nouns. And finally,
하고.
can be used with both consonant and vowels. For example,
물하고 버터. 개하고 소.
to conjugate a verb or an adjective, we need the stem plus.
아요. 어요. 해요.
If the last vowel is,
아. 오.
we use.
아요.
In order to conjugate a verb or an adjective correctly, it's important to know the last vowel of the stem. Take a look at the following two stems. Although both of them end with the same vowel, one of them ends with a consonant and one of them ends with a vowel. So when we conjugate verbs and adjectives, first we need to look at the last vowel, then whether it ends with a vowel or a consonant. The following stems end with
아. 오.
vowel. So we know that we need to use.
아요.
Next, we check if the stem ends with a consonant or a vowel. If the stem ends with a consonant, we simply add,
아요, 달아요,
but if the stem ends with a vowel, we either add only
요,
or we combine the two vowels.
만나요, 가요, 와요.
If the last vowel is
어, 우, 으, 이,
then we add.
어요,
If the stem ends with a consonant, we simply add.
어요, 먹어요, 물어요, 읽어요.
But if the stem ends with a vowel, we either add only
요,
or we combine the two vowels.
줘요, 마셔요.
If the verb or the adjective ended with,
하다,
we simply change it to,
해요,
for example,
공부하다, 공부해요. 말하다, 말해요. 똑똑하다, 똑똑해요.
exercise. See if you can use the correct suffix to conjugate the following verbs and adjectives. Irregulars. Some of the most commonly used verbs and adjectives in Korean language are irregular, so it's important to remember them in order to conjugate them correctly.
예쁘다, 예뻐요. 바쁘다, 바빠요. 기쁘다, 기뻐요.
Past tense is conjugated exactly the same way as the present tense, but the only difference is, instead of using
아요, 어요, 해요.
we use
왔어요, 왔어요, 했어요. 아, 오, 왔어요. 달다, 달았어요. 오다, 왔어요. 어, 우, 으, 이, 왔어요. 넓다, 넓었어요. 주다, 줬어요. 마시다, 마셨어요. 하다, 했어요. 공부하다, 공부했어요. 요리하다, 요리했어요. 노래하다, 노래했어요.
subject marker particle. The subject is a person or thing doing something. The subject particle is put after the subject of a sentence,
이,
is used after a consonant, and
가,
is used after a vowel.
호민이 빵을 먹어요. 수지인이 영화를 봐요. 육하가 운동해요.
Topic marker particle. The topic or theme of a sentence is what is being talked about. The topic particles are,
은, 는,
they are put after the topic of a sentence.
왕강은 술을 마셔요. 제임스는 공부해요. 저는 세수해요.
Some very quick and basic tips to help you understand the difference between subject marker particle and the topic marker particle. For the subject particle, the word before the subject particle is the main focus of the sentence. And for the topic particle, the word after the topic particle is the main focus of the sentence. Take a look at these two sentences. Coffee is delicious. So for the first example, the focus and importance is on the coffee, while in the second example, the focus and the importance is on the taste, not the coffee. Topic marker particle is also used to compare and contrast. when you say you do something or you like something but you don't like something else. For example,
저는 차는 안 마시지만 커피는 마셔요.
I don't drink tea, but I drink coffee. Last, subject particle is for new information and topic particle is for things that are known and familiar and we already talked about. Take a look at this example.
우리 집에 강아지 한 마리가 있어요. 그 강아지는 1살이에요.
So we used the subject particle when we mentioned the puppy for the first time, but when we mentioned the puppy again, we used the topic particle because it was no longer new information. The object particle. The object particle is put after the object of a sentence,
을,
is used after a consonant, and
를,
is used after a vowel.
책을 읽어요. 커피를 마셔요. 친구를 만나요.
Korean might be considered a pro-drop language. In daily conversation, practically all grammar context can be omitted in a sentence, including pronouns and the particles we talked about. Take a look at this example.
저는 아침을 먹어요.
We can drop the pronoun, the topic particle, the object particle, and the meaning is still the same.
아침 먹어요.
To say I am or someone is, we use either
예요.
or.
이에요. 저는 학생이에요. 저는 의사예요. 그는 선생님이에요. 그녀는 가수예요.
To say that I am not or you're not, we use
가 아니에요.
after a vowel,
이 아니에요.
after a consonant. Example,
저는 학생이 아니에요. 저는 가수가 아니에요.
a time and place particle. The particle
에
is used after words related to time and place.
5시에 가요. 금요일에 만나요. 학교에 가요. 8월에 졸업해요.
To say that you do something at a place, you put
에서
after the place.
저는 학교에서 공부해요. 그들이 회사에서 일해요.
Negating verbs and adjectives. Verbs and adjectives are negated in two ways, the short form and the long form. Both mean exactly the same thing, but one merely might sound better than the other in certain places. The short form, simply add
안
before the conjugated verb or adjective. Example,
가요. 안 가요. 쉬어요. 안 쉬어요. 작아요. 안 작아요.
the long form, remove the
다
at the end of the verb or adjective and add
지 않아요.
example,
가다. 가지 않아요. 쉬다. 쉬지 않아요. 작다. 작지 않아요.
imperative. By simply removing the
여
at the end of a conjugated verb, you will get the imperative.
가요. 가. 먹어요. 먹어. 마셔요. 마셔. 말해요. 말해.
Numbers. Korean language uses two regularly used numerals, Sino-Korean, that is based on Chinese numerals, and the native Korean numbers. We will briefly talk about both systems and how they are used. The Sino-Korean. The Sino-Korean is used when you talk about dates, when you're counting days, counting years, counting money or talking about money, and also phone numbers. And the native Korean numbers are used when we are counting things, counting people, animals, objects. And when we are counting things, we need to use the measure words. There are many measure words in Korean, but here are some of the most useful ones. Counter words are used this way. First, the thing that is counted, then the number, how many, and the counter word. Example,
소 3마리. 펜 6자루. 차, 네, 대.
There are also places when both systems are used together. For example, when we talk about the time, as in what time is it, we have to use both systems together. For the hour, we use the native Korean system, and for the minute, we have to use the Sino-Korean system.
1시, 2시, 1분, 2분.
Both systems can be used to count month in Korean, but with different counter words.
개월,
Is based on Chinese characters, so we use the Sino-Korean numbers.
달,
Is native Korean word, so we use the native Korean numbers. Example:
1개월, 한 달, 2개월, 두 달, 3개월, 세 달.
There are two words for the number 0,
0, 0,
and both words are of Chinese origin. You can use the first one for all the circumstances except when you're saying a phone number. In that case, just use the second one.
010.
By now, you should have an idea how the Korean language works and how suffixes are added. Before we end the video, we will shortly show 3 more important and easy suffixes to learn. Thank you for watching the video and subscribe to our Glossika channel to see more videos like this. Also, please tell us in the comment section what language do you want to see next.